let's get into our top story, which is the war in Ukraine. It's our favorite segment where the United States and NATO, who are they going to go to war with next? It's like spin the wheel, figure it out, because it's hard to keep track. Over the weekend, we saw a number. Is it Haiti? Is it Taiwan? Is it Ethiopia? Is it Russia? We're getting ready for a massive military move from Russia against Ukraine. And overnight, China and now Italy, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and India, all telling their citizens to basically get the hell out of Ukraine right now. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Just get the heck out. China, of course, a major ally of Russia. Maybe they got a phone call, perhaps. Maybe they got a little heads up about what's coming. This comes as Russia announced today its mobilization of 300,000 troops is complete. On Friday, Putin said that he thought it would take another 2 weeks, but they finished today 2 weeks early and closed the offices needed for the mobilization. They will not need to call up any more soldiers, and they are ready for what's coming. So yeah, might want to get the hell out of Ukraine.
Right.
A massive military mobilization in just days or weeks away, depending on whether or not the ground is freezing, and whether or not, again, they're going to be able to mobilize in probably about 2 to 3 weeks. That's what, according to Colonel Douglas McGregor, said. They're going to wait till that happens. Who knows? Meanwhile, a few days ago, Patrick Lancaster asked this question on Twitter: is Belarus about to be an active part in the Ukraine war? Belarus has introduced a counterterrorist operation after reports of planned provocations by a number of neighboring states. So, today, then we've got word Belarus announced they stopped a terrorist attack that likely came from Ukraine. Here's the map of Belarus, just to remind you sort of how all of this country fits in the mix of it. Notice there's the Minsk. There's Minsk right there, the capital, right there in the middle of it, right? Of course, the Minsk Accords from 2014. According to Belarusian Internal Affairs Ministry, saboteurs who planned terror attacks were trained in Poland, gained combat experience in Ukraine. They were then tasked with planting bombs and preparing incendiary devices. So what happened? Well, then Russia launched fighter jets over Belarus today. Watch. So you can see these are Belarus. These are jets flying over Belarus, and these are hypersonic. According to reports, these were military planes with hypersonic weapons on them, flying over Belarus on what they said was like general security sweeps now, but they're going to be ramping up these security protocols over Belarus.
Okay.
So back to NATO. Instead of backing off, Western countries led by NATO forces launched attacks inside of Russia. And just when you thought that the U.S. would pull back, it's actually turning things up to 11, and they're going to get us all killed in a nuclear war. So overnight, NATO and Ukrainian forces launched an attack on a recruiting showcase target inside of Russia. Take a look at this.
Да ну нахуй. Нихуя себе, блядь.
So a day before, 2 men opened fire at this same training camp. This attack killed 11 people and injured 15. The Russian Defense Ministry said that 2 gunmen were from a former Soviet nation and had fired on the soldiers during target practice at a firing range. So here's how the propaganda New York Times portrayed the attacks. Look at this. Struggling on the battlefield in southern and eastern Ukraine, Russia felt war on its own territory on Sunday as more than a dozen explosions ripped through a Russian border region, and a series of blasts severely damaged the offices of Russia's puppet government in the Ukrainian city of Donetsk.
Okay. Or the government that they just voted into
Right.
Russia.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, and also, we got to remember, every time they bomb something, there's generally civilians, which means they just bomb their own country.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
So
yeah,
they're just
good
like
point.
openly admitting it now.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, now at least they're calling attention to it. So before they wouldn't say it. Now they're saying, oh, it's just a puppet government, so now we can attack them. Okay, makes a lot of sense. So this is how you win the hearts and minds of the people back.
Yet they are telling us that they won't attend any peace talks because these are our people. We can't leave them there. We can bomb them, but we can't leave them there. Do you see how that doesn't make sense?
Yeah. So we can bomb them, but we can't take care of them. So we can't provide any kind of help to them, but we can certainly bomb them.
No, the idea is we can't come to peace talks because we know that Russia's conditions will be leaving these regions in Russia's hands. And we can't just leave them to be a part of Russia because they're our people. We need to take them back into our borders. That's how they feel. That's what the First Lady said on 60 Minutes. That's why we can't have any peace talks because these are our people. But it's okay to bomb them.
Yeah. NATO forces, meanwhile, also launched attacks in the Donbass, hitting buildings in Donetsk. Reports are that these were HIMARS attacks from American weapons. American tax dollars hard at work. Watch. Yeah, so you just look at these images. This was an administrative building. And you might remember, by the way, that the people of Donetsk voted overwhelmingly a few weeks ago to become part of Russia. 99% of the vote in Donetsk. I wonder why. Again, you have these types of attacks, maybe that they don't want to be a part of it. Reminder that Russia now officially recognizes this as part of Russia. So NATO is actively attacking Russia. Putin spoke to reporters this morning on this very question and said, sending NATO troops into direct engagement, a direct clash with the Russian army, is a very dangerous step that could lead to a global catastrophe. I hope those who talk about this will be smart enough not to undertake such steps. Russia responded this morning with massive drone attacks then across Ukraine. Take a look at this. This was a drone attack early morning as the sun was just arising over Kiev in Ukraine. This was a unmanned drone attack. So these are kamikaze drones. Then a short time later, visual confirmation of the attack, which took out the power grid to Ukraine. So here's what one of these looks like. These are Iranian drones. Take a look at this. It's pretty. They're actually pretty large. And then we have visual confirmation then just a short time later of this actually striking the power grid. So you can take a look at this. So this was visual confirmation of that power plant being hit. There, according to reports this afternoon, over 580 different cities now through Ukraine are without power. So this is total. They're totally in the dark as a result of this. And you can blame NATO for these provocations. More attacks this afternoon in the capital city of Kiev. Russia using a lot of kamikaze drones. As you can see, journalists running for cover. Take a look at this. So these were the drones that were used to hit these targets, were kamikaze drones from Iran, according to reports. This is one of 4 drones this afternoon launched an attack. And Ukraine shot this one down. You can read what's on the tail of this. So this, after the attack in Belgorod, this is what it says on the tail from Russia. So they're sending a response back now, right to Ukraine, and they've written it on a number of these unmanned drones.
In Sharpie?
I guess it's in Sharpie, letting them know where this is happening. This is where it's coming from. So this weekend, the Biden administration threatened Iran, saying if it involves itself in the Ukraine war, then there would be hell to pay. So as if the U.S. and the NATO friends are the only ones allowed to meddle in Ukraine. They can't do that now.
That seems weird that that's what they're using as verification is Sharpie. Like they think that like the Sharpie would last through a detonation.
Well, typically in these things, the tails, I guess, survive if they're shot. I mean, so one of these 4 was shot down, and this was the one that they recovered.
It's a good ad for Sharpie.
Well, I mean, I guess in response, we saw them on the other side. Ukraine, you could go on that website and you could, send money to your spouse, or you could, like, for your anniversary gift,
yes,
you could write it on Sharpie and they put it on a missile and they would launch it into Russia.
That's what we're doing. It's like messages in a bottle, but messages in a bomb.
Yeah, it's so sweet. It's so lovely. And then NATO launched
I just feel like it's really hard to verify that it's real. You know what I mean? Like
the Sharpie
that could so easily be faked.
Well, what would be? I always think of it like, well, what's the motivation then? Like, so they hit Ukraine and NATO forces hit inside of Russia, hit this city.
Yes.
Of Belgorod.
And
right?
They're not wondering where the retaliation comes from. They know it comes from Russia.
Right. Like, where is it's not coming from? I mean, yes, they're Iranian drones that they bought and they're using, but it's not like, Iran's launching these attacks.
It's unlike the shelling that was done on the Zaporizhia plant, where Russia showed those shells had English serial numbers and looked to be sent from the UK. And so that is maybe more official than like a signature or a "Love Russia" written in a Sharpie.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So then NATO launched their nuclear exercises this morning. So all of this on the backdrop of NATO deciding, okay, you know what, we don't have enough tensions right now, so let's kick off our nuclear exercises. The operation called Steadfast Noon is the name of it, where they launched. They're ratcheting things up, and they're going in the opposite direction of trying to pull back on this. The deployment of B-52 bombers, launching their nuclear training exercises. They'll last until October 30th, with 14 countries, up to 60 aircraft, including B-52 Stratofortresses, strategic bombers, taking part in the training flights over Belgium and Britain to practice use of all American nuclear bombs based in Europe. So it's a fun exercise. You just got to get out and flex your nuclear weapons every now and again. According to journalist Vanessa Beeley, nothing is going well for NATO at this hour in Ukraine. They depleted their weapons reserves and lost an estimated 40,000 soldiers in the last 2 failed counteroffensives. And Ukrainians are being used basically as cannon fodder. So this is amazing. Ukrainian reconnaissance forces were captured and interrogated. They confirmed what we already knew, was that active duty American, British, and Polish forces are actively involved in a fight. These are, of course, in addition to the contractors from America, Italy, Britain, and Poland. Watch this. It's subtitled. It's an amazing video.
Путь завести групу, що і подождати, поки вона окупається, і уйти. Легіон, піхота.
Что за легион?
З різних стран, іностранці. Польща, Італія, Америка, Англія.
А вы завели 7 групп.
Так.
Каждая группа 20 человек.
Приблизно там 15, 17, 20.
То есть больше 100 человек лично вы завели?
Да. Балаклія.
Как?
Балаклія. Семенівка. Шевченкове. Купинск. И остальные перестовые.
Среди них были офицеры действующие?
Да.
Были? Каких стран?
Америки, Англии были, Польши были.
То есть это были действующие офицеры вооруженных сил Америки, Англии. А в каких званиях?
Лейтенант, подполковник один был. Если бы иностранцы нам не помогли, ми б розпалися зразу. Нас дуже мало і нас дуже много неопитних бойців.
Any thoughts?
Wow.
Yeah, that's sad. Part that hits
we've been talking about that all along.
Right, and him saying, we're sort
there.
of inexperienced. Like we have no business in this war.
Right.
If this is your son or your brother, you would go to peace talks. It is time for peace talks. It has been all along.
And you asked a question like, did you sign up for this? Did any of us sign up for this? If you're an American or you're a member of NATO or a NATO country, did you sign up for this? Did you sign up? Did you authorize your country to go to war against Russia? I sure as hell didn't.
Think about it. Remember when we talked about that story where just regular people were going online and going over there to fight like voluntarily? Like that had to be organized by some kind of organization that put that together. People weren't just willy-nilly flying over there with weapons.
Well, some were. I mean, we saw videos we played here on this show where people were like, I came over here to get involved and I realized there was no organization. It was just like, they're sending us to the front with no weapons. We definitely had seen stories like that.
Well, I know, but I think they would have had to have gone through some kind of legal channels, because wouldn't they had to have visas or something to get there? Like they would have had to state why they were going. Like they couldn't be like, hey, we're just coming over here to fight Russians.
I don't know. It's interesting because when we talk about Ethiopia later on today, the visa process in and out of Ukraine seems to be pretty open, except for people who are of fighting age who couldn't leave Ukraine when the conflict began. So it's possible that it's porous, but not for anyone to leave who is of fighting age, and anyone who wants to fight can come in. I don't know. It's really hard to say.
It's so troubling. I mean, to see these guys and to think like, oh yeah, we're there. We're just being used as cannon fodder, right? Like they're driving the train, they're driving the tanks, they're leading the show, and we're just being used as cannon fodder. I sure as hell didn't authorize this for the United States to go in there. I'm sure if you're a Western country or you're a European country, you didn't want these people using your money to go in there and fight in this way. If they would have asked you, what would you have said? I'm sure, again.
Well, I think that's how they set it all up. They, we're paying these higher gas prices because of Putin. We're doing all this. So it's like they, through propaganda, got us all to feel like, well, maybe the money is helping. Maybe this is what we should do because, we can't let democracy die.
Right.
Over there in Ukraine.
Yeah, we need to keep borders tight. A border's a border, unless it's Ethiopia, and then that's okay.
Yeah. So, but the EU is not doing anything differently, right? So they launch all these protests, but the European Union is like, we don't hear you. Demanding change. We don't hear any of that. Instead, they're ramping up sanctions and they're sending a new round of aid to Ukraine while Europeans can't turn on the heat. So the EU today, Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell says EU has enough cash to finance military aid to Ukraine, stating, quote, there's enough money. Don't worry about the money, he says. And he says we must continue to support Ukraine. And this is what the EU ministers will announce today in the 6th tranche of the Ukraine military aid package. So they got their 6th tranche out there to Ukraine today. The EU does. So Borrell is telling Europe, hey, don't worry about the money. Really? Last week, Politico reported that European Peace Facility, which was $1.5 billion, that fund that was meant to assist the EU in countries replacing weapons that they're sending to Ukraine, was unable to satisfy more than half of the requests. They don't have the money. They don't have it. They don't have the money. So he's lying. Don't worry about the money. We'll just print more of it. Who cares? Who cares? We just got to keep sending more weapons and money to Ukraine. It's not just France, by the way, in Germany protesting NATO and the EU. It's the small but mighty country of Moldova. Estimates are that over 70,000 people took to the streets over the weekend to protest pro-NATO President Maya Sandu, who says that they need to do everything in their power to stop Russian aggression. I guess that means the people of Moldova need to suffer for Zelensky, just like the rest of Europe. Here is pro-NATO President Maya Sandu explaining this. Listen. That's not how she normally sounds. She sounds like a cricket there. Or some sort of a cyborg. She is a human, not a robot, I promise you. Anyway, it says, without peace in Ukraine, there can be no peace in Europe. We cannot let aggression and fear win, she says. And she basically said, we have to provide and continue to provide our support to Ukraine. That's what we have to do. We're going to continue to do that. Well, that didn't go over very well.
I'd be curious.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know how much Russia has spent this whole time versus how much Ukraine has received. Because if you look at what Russia has spent making the progress that they have in this amount of time with the amount of soldiers that they have and compare that to what we've given Ukraine, There's no way Russia is even probably a third of what we've sent.
No way. No,
If
I mean,
that.
it's upwards. The U.S. alone is now upwards of 80 billion.
But they're not reacting. They planned this and went in when they were ready. The rest of the world is reacting, right? And so presumably you're going to spend less if you've already planned something.
Yeah, you've budgeted.
Well, right, but if you take the money that they've spent, that we've sent there, they should have had enough to annihilate what they were going to annihilate. Like with what we've spent over there, they should have been able to just go right on into Russia.
You would think, right? But even politicians, when they announce the packages, they're like, they need more. This is not the end. You know, they're going to burn through this, but we need it. So here you go.
So, yeah, her speech didn't go over very well in Moldova, as you can imagine. The people of Moldova had this to say over the weekend. And there's some more protests. They want them to stop. They want them to, sorry, I keep hitting the mute button. They want to stop the NATO aggression. They want to stop the support of NATO. They want to stop the money that's being sent into Ukraine. And, again, no one's listening to these people. No one's listening to the people of Germany. No one's listening to the people of France. No one's listening to. They're just going to continue to send money. Prague. Yeah.
Yes, Germany, Austria, France. We've covered these protests up and down Europe, and politicians don't seem to be bothered all that much.
So if you think about where we are in all of this, are we in a recession? How have sanctions affected the United States, the rest of the world? Bearing in mind, the United States, I believe, and many economists already believe, is already in a recession. This weekend, Biden's lackey, Pete Buttigieg, was asked about the U.S. economy by George Stephanopoulos. Asked him how it's going. Listen.
The threat of a recession is still looming. We saw the head of J.P. Morgan, Jamie Dimon, said it's all but certain to be coming in a few months, and it's going to be bad. How worried are you?
Look, it's possible, but not inevitable. And we're doing everything we can to strengthen the foundations of the American economy.
Yeah, by doing what? By offering energy tax credits that next year you'll be able to take advantage of by weatherizing your roof with solar panels? I mean, that's what it gets us. So, again, all of this, I think, is, of course, why, the United States trying to hang on to power by making sure that Europe is collapsing. Again, this is exactly why they attacked the Nord Stream pipeline. It's clear as day, to make sure that Europe goes back into the dark ages and the U.S. hegemony rises again. The power of the U.S. dollar, that's the control that they have, and that's what the United States wants. And Biden explained it clearly. You can see it clearly in his face yesterday while eating an ice cream cone, explained the U.S. dollar and why he's worried about Europe, not the U.S.
Are you concerned about the strength of the dollar right now?
I'm not concerned about the strength of the dollar. I'm concerned about the rest of the world. Does that make sense?
Can you explain that?
Yes. Our economy is strong as hell. The internals are. Inflation is worldwide. It's worse off everywhere else than it is in the United States. So the problem is the lack of economic growth and sound policy in other countries, not so much ours.
Oh, okay.
While he's eating a $14 ice cream cone.
It did look expensive.
Yeah,
the waffle cone alone is like $6.
That's clearly 6 scoops in there shoved in that thing. I know when you go for the waffle cone, you're paying a premium price. And he's not concerned about the economy.
Was he in Portland? Was that in Portland? Because it looked like
Yes,
salt
he
and
actually
straw
was.
to me.
He came
where it
into
was?
Portland.
Is that what? Yeah.
Yep.
So clearly,
It looked like salt and
expensive
straw.
cone.
Now,
So
it
then
is.
you
It's actually
know
so
how much
popular.
that
There's one.
costs.
There's a real quick story from Portland, but there was a shooting right outside one of those places, like several years back, like 4 or 5 years ago, right outside of Salt and Straw, and the news crews were there interviewing like people on the street, and people like this one woman they interviewed was like, well, I don't know how long this is going to take. I want my Salt and Straw, and it's like somebody just got shot, and they're like, Well, get them out of the way because we need to get back in there. It was insane.
Oh.
To get my salt and straw.
I mean, at least it's not a dipped cone, because then you really put yourself over budget with that. And Clayton always does the dipped plus the rainbow sprinkles, which I don't know what they add, but he likes it.
Yeah, it adds a little crunch to it. I think it's great. But that's clearly what President Biden's focused on right now. Hey, the U.S. economy's strong as hell. I'm going to eat my cone, watch Europe go down in flames, watch, all we need to do. We're going to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them here. And
well, there is some indication. The Congressional Budget Office today released numbers showing that the deficit went down because tax revenues are up. So, the United States has not even employed that 87,000 IRS revenue agents. They still are collecting, and they are not spending as much as they did last year on COVID packages. So the deficit does seem to, but that doesn't mean that it's great by any means. It just means that there's no emergency COVID packages, although the government is comfortable telling us there's still a COVID emergency, just no emergency spending. We're going to talk about COVID later on in the show.